up, Tater Tots? Welcome to the Parker's Couch. If this is your first time joining us, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Share it with your friends. If you're familiar with us, continue to share it. Post it on your socials. Do all the things. All right, today we are getting into some of the latest cases on P. Diddy. So we're going to talk about Crystal Mckinney, and we're going to talk about April Lampros. So April, I actually have the court document. Crystal, I swear to y'all, I had this document like a few days ago and I was reading through it and I was just busy. Everything was just busy last week. And I was saying, I'm going to get here and I'm going to go through this because y'all know I like going through the court cases. Today, I cannot find it anywhere. And of course, I did not save the link and send it to myself. But I haven't been able to find the document again for Crystal. So we're going to start with Crystal McKinney's lawsuit that came out last week. But I'm just going to give you the nuts and the bolts about what's in the document or what she's talking about, what the claims are, and just read an article about that if you're not familiar. And then we'll get into April's. All right. So, according to court documents obtained by ET, model Crystal McKinney claims that she met the battle rap mogul in 2003 when she was 20 years old and at the behest of an unnamed fashion designer who introduced her to him during a men's fashion week event held at a popular restaurant in New York City. So McKinney claims that the fashion designer began to direct her appearance as he sought to ensure Combs found her attractive. When she got to the restaurant, McKinney alleges the designer insisted she sit right across from Diddy, whom she claims began making a pass at her with flirtatious comments and later insisted she was going to make it big one day as a model. At that point, McKinney claims she had already been signed with the popular modeling agency IMG and modeled for Tommy Hilfiger, Macy's, and other winning MTV's inaugural model mission in 1998 at just 17 years old. Also, 98, 17, we're close to the same age, so we're around that same thing. I used to try to model. I used to try to do, that's when I started trying to do a little something back then when I was around that age. That never materialized. I did not stick with it. But anyway, ET has reached out to Diddy for comment. Of course, no comment. But McKinney claims Diddy promised her he was going to help her career. But throughout the night, McKinney claims Diddy bordered on Liren. His flirting bordered on Liren as he leaned across the table towards hers and piled her with alcohol throughout the dinner as he repeatedly refilled her glass with wine. After dinner, McKinney alleges Diddy invited her to his studio. She claims she obliged under the reassurance they wouldn't be alone in the studio. But when she got to the studio, McKinney claims she found Combs and several other men seated together. She claims they were passing around a bottle of Hennessy and joints. And she's 17, y'all, right now. McKinney alleges she took a hit and she says she felt very powerful. The model claims in her lawsuit that she later came to understand that Combs had laced the joint with a narcotic or other intoxicating substances. She also claims Diddy pressured her with more alcohol and marijuana by telling her that she was acting too uptight. McKinney stated in court documents that she felt as if she was floating, and that after seeing that she was very intoxicated, Diddy demanded she follow him. She claims Diddy physically led her to the bathroom where he forced himself on her and began kissing her without her consent. She claims Diddy then shoved her head down his crotch before commanding her to suck it. She alleges she refused, but Diddy pushed her head down into his blum 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 and forced her to perform oral sets on him. McKinney claims Diddy ultimately led her back to the studio, felt more and more woozy before losing consciousness. She claims that she awakened in shock and found herself in a taxi cab. heading back to the designer's apartment. She also claims that as her consciousness returned, she realized that she had been sexually assaulted by Combs. Following the alleged assault, McKinney claims Diddy had her blackball in the industry and utilized his significant influence to impede her career growth. Then, sometime in 2004, McKinney claims she attempted suicide and was hospitalized. And in the ensuing years, McKinney claims she experienced alcohol and drug addiction as she attempted to cope with the emotional trauma of being assaulted. McKinney, who claims the clothing she wore the night of the alleged assault remains unwashed and wrapped in plastic, stated her marriage from 2006 to 2010 fell apart as she had a mental breakdown precipitated by memories of the assault. McKinney, who lives in Georgia, is suing Diddy for sexual assault under the New York City Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Act. This then at this point was the sixth sexual lawsuit Diddy brought upon Diddy that he is facing. Well, that's wild. That's a wild story, and almost a Monica Lewinsky situation there. Well, just like it, saving the dress, that whole thing. Being so young, a situation like this, that I could see that totally being traumatizing. That's a lot. Now, I apologize. I don't have the court case to read through all there, but we got the nuts and the bolts. But let's go to the one that I do have, because after that came out, there was another one that was released, and this one is from April Lampros, and I'm gonna share my screen real quick so some of you can read along with this with me as well, or see what I'm talking about as I go through it. All right, the Supreme Court of the state of New York, or the state of New York County of New York. April Lampros is the plaintiff, and she's going against Sean Combs, Bad Boy Records, Arista Records, subsidiary of Sony Music Entertainment, John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10, and ABC Corp's 1 through 10. Excuse me, and let's go down here. We'll skip by the introduction and stuff here, but I will let you know April Lampros is a Caucasian female and a United States citizen who was a citizen still too and relevant at the time this stuff happened. And this is alleged to take a place within New York, and that's why it's being filed there in New York. During the relevant period, defendants John and Jane Doe's 1 through 10 are currently unknown individuals and or employees who aided or abetted in the commission of conduct complained of herein, or who either acted within the scope of their employment. Defendants ratified, embraced, and added to this conduct. As parties engage in discovery, plaintiff retains the right to amend the complaint to add these individuals' employees by name. And also the defendants ABC Corp 1 through 10 are currently unknown entities who employed the plaintiff or aided or abetted in the commission of conduct complained of herein. And as the same thing, these people can eventually be named too if the plaintiff so chooses. All right, so let's get into the summary of factual accusations. So y'all know how we do in our court cases to get into this. And so let's get into this one a little bit more and see what's going on. So upon information and belief, Ms. Lampros met Mr. Combs in early 1994 after the birth of his first son, Justin Dior Combs. At the time, Ms. Lampros was a college student at the Fashion Institute of Technology, FIT, how some of you may know it, studying fashion design and marketing. To impress her, Mr. Combs would often invite her in Bad Boy recording studios in New York City. We'll invite her to Bad Boy recording studios. Ms. Lampros, Sean Combs, and a friend are pictured right here. As you can see on the screen, I might blow that up so you can see it bigger. But when she met Mr. Combs, Miss Lampros shared with him her dreams of working in the fashion industry, and Mr. Combs promised to mentor her and help her by introducing her to music and fashion industry executives, as well as assisting her with finding work. Mr. Combs love bombed her. He showered her with gifts and flowers, as evidenced by one of the cards that accompanied the flowers that Mr. Combs sent Miss Lampros for Valentine's Day in 1994. And remember, he just had his first kid right here. But it says, "Happy Valentine's Day, love, Puffy." Mr. Combs went so far as to invite Miss Lampros to his first Father's Day celebration. That's tacky. The invitation to the event is below. We see the invitation here. A month after the Father's Day event, Mr. Combs invited Miss Lampros to an exclusive bad boy party with performances by Usher, Craig Mack, and the Notorious B.I.G. Upon information and belief, what Mr. Combs displayed as a kind gesture quickly manifested into an aggressive, coercive, and abusive relationship based on sex. These acts were not isolated to the state of New York, as Mr. Combs would fly Miss Lampros to Atlanta to see him, where they would spend time together. Miss Lampros would also fly to Miami to see Mr. Combs at his home. Upon information and belief, throughout the years, Mr. Combs, there were 4 terrifying sexual encounters Miss Lampros endured. Now, before we even go more, I know what's probably playing in some people's minds, like it's playing in mine, but there are 4 encounters, and there are flying out of these different places. It's the why question. I don't know what's in here, y'all. I haven't read through this one yet. So I wanted to read through this one with you all reading it for the first time. But what's coming out of my mind is like, what kept you coming back? And that's not, and I want to just know this is not victim blaming, but I'm just curious and see what we're gonna find and what we're gonna uncover. Upon information and belief through the okay, there were 4 terrifying encounters. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs had a terrible temper and often threatened to harm her if she failed to do what he said. All right. Now we're getting into some of that right away. If he witnessed her talking to other men or if she failed to take his phone calls. According to Miss Lampros, she was also not allowed to talk about her relationship with Mr. Combs to anyone because he did not want anyone to know he was seeing her because she is a white woman. Interesting. Sexual assault encounter number 1. The first horrific sexual encounter occurred in 1995 when Miss Lampros met up with Mr. Combs in the south of Houston Street, Soho, at a bar. She was introduced to a woman, the name is redacted, and the group lightly drank through the evening. At the time, Miss Lampros was a college student and did not drink any alcohol. Due to Mr. Combs' delusional and violent outbursts, she succumbed to pressure and reluctantly drank with Mr. Combs. Got her drinking. She's underage right now in college out here at this bar. As they drank, Miss Lampros began to feel uneasy. At this point, she had only had a few sips of one drink. Miss Lampros and the redacted name were guided to a vehicle and left the bar with Mr. Combs. So it seems like the drinks were laced with something, allegedly. They arrived at the Millennium Hotel. While at the hotel, Miss Lampros continued to feel uneasy. She recalls feeling like the walls were closing in on her. She was laid out on the hotel bed where Mr. Combs forced himself on top of her. Mr. Combs began to kiss Miss Lampros, and as she turned her head trying to avoid the interaction, he grabbed her face. Mr. Combs continued to kiss her forcefully. Miss Lampros informed him that she wasn't feeling well, but he ignored her words and continued to take off her clothing. Miss Lampros tried to hold on to her clothing, but she felt weak and powerless in the situation. Miss Lampros pleaded with Mr. Combs to stop, and he ignored her. She could not process why this was occurring and felt a loss of control. Miss Lampros was being, trigger word, raped by Mr. Combs, and she soon passed out. It's heavy. The next morning, Miss Lampros was awoken by the sun peering through the drapes. She was nude, sore, and confused. Miss Lampros quickly got out of bed, clothed herself, and left the hotel room as fast as she could. Months after the first rape, Mr. Combs pursued Miss Lampros. He sent her gifts, cards, and flowers, and used his power and access to music industry events to lure Miss Lampros back to him. Miss Lampros was a hopeful yet naive college student and took Mr. Combs at his word and believed that the first rape was a possible mulligan and decided to give him a second chance. At the time, Miss Lampros was a college student in her late teens and early 20s. Her decision to return to Mr. Combs after being raped is indicative of many assault survivors who return to their abusers. This is reminding me a little bit of gosh, what was that recent Netflix show? Oh gosh, I'm gonna shoot myself right now because I can't remember the name of it. But that was dealing with the reindeer, the baby reindeer, the interesting push and pull towards victims. We often don't think about this, and I think it's hard to process in our mind and make it make sense. But this connection of like abuse, of people who are abused to their abusers, the victims to those doing the abusing, like that connection. Sometimes that is there, like it's an awkward and weird one and hard to explain. It's like this power dynamic important, and that helped kind of open my eyes, that series, to some of that as well. But let's continue. Miss Lampros agreed to meet with Mr. Combs to discuss the business opportunities he promised, as he knew her passion was to pursue a career in fashion and music. They met up and talked near his Manhattan apartment, which was somewhere near 30th Street at the time. Miss Lampros was under the impression that what had occurred months prior between them would not happen again. She was holding on to Mr. Combs' promises of access to his industry to pursue her passion. Mr. Combs was respectful, regained her trust, and used their common interactions with Arista Records, um, the parent company of Bad Boy Records, and Miss Lampros was an intern at Arista at the time too as well. Things seemed to be normal between the two until the second incident of sexual assault. Puffy, allegedly you are a conning man. Like, this is a whole strategy to pull someone back in and gain that trust all over again. So, sexual encounter number 2. During the second incident of sexual assault, Mr. Combs and Ms. Lampros were in a parking garage near his Manhattan apartment. She believes, once again, it was somewhere near 30th Street. They were headed to dinner, and Mr. Combs was slightly inebriated. Sorry, excuse me. As they headed toward the parking garage, Mr. Combs grabbed Miss Lampros by the waist and forced her down to her knees. He quickly unzipped his pants, exposing his erect penis. He then grabbed her hair, wrapping it around his fist. He then forced his erect penis into her mouth and demanded Miss Lampros perform oral sex. As Miss Lampros' eyes filled with tears, she could see the parking garage attendant witnessing this horrific assault. Oh, wow. This had no impact on Mr. Combs. He was blinded by his lustful desire to pleasure himself as at Miss Lampros' expense. I wonder if this attendant is around or to, back this up or anything. When Mr. Combs was done with her, he told her to get up. Miss Lampros was in shock, morally depleted, embarrassed, and in physical agony because Mr. Combs violently yanking her down to her knees and pulling her hair. Once again, Miss Lampros made the decision to distance herself, and once again, Mr. Combs came back with gifts and empty promises. Miss Lampros was not moved. She had enough and decided to focus on her studies and leave Mr. Combs for good. Unbeknownst to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs was not good at accepting rejection. Now, we talked about this if you saw the video with the Rolling Stone article that talked about this very same point here. So this lines up. He immediately switched his approach and became angry, threatening, and forceful. He developed this mobster persona, and Miss Lampros was in fear of him. Now, this is kind of stuff Lil Rod was talking about, and that fear element that P. Diddy is able to produce, and the means that he has. But this is Young Puff we're talking about now here too. He's building that access at this point. Mr. Combs began calling Miss Lampros incessantly and would often call her just to say, if anyone is in your apartment, I will beat your ass and theirs. Miss Lampros' reasonable fear of Mr. Combs left her feeling stuck with him and with no way out. He knew where she lived and worked and had connections to ensure her compliance with his demands. She felt that if she disobeyed him, he would take away her dreams of pursuing a career in this world, in his world. Mr. Combs would also threaten to blacklist her in the industry if she tried to mess with him in any way. Miss Lampros' dreams and everything she's been working hard for were in the palm of his hands. So, sexual assault encounter number 3. One night in 1996, Mr. Combs ordered Miss Lampros into his Manhattan apartment. Mr. Combs' residence was in the 30s and parked near the Midtown Tunnel. When Miss Lampros arrived, Kim Porter and 2 other people were present. Mr. Combs introduced the women. They went to a nightclub. After the club closed, they returned to Mr. Combs' apartment and they began a night of drinking. A couple hours into the evening, Mr. Combs forced Miss Porter and Miss Lampros to take ecstasy. Mr. Combs instructed the women to open their mouths. When they complied with the demand, Mr. Combs forced the pill down their throats to ensure the pills were swallowed. Mr. Combs' hands were so far down Miss Lampros' throat, she gagged. He even checked under their tongues. With the combination of alcohol and ecstasy, Miss Lampros recalls feeling lightheaded and lethargic. After being forced to take ecstasy, Mr. Combs then demanded Kim Porter to have sexual intercourse with Miss Lampros. Wow. Wow. Miss Lampros vocally opposed the idea, but Mr. Combs quickly reminded her that she had no control over the situation, as he could make her lose her job. Miss Lampros knew she had to comply because she had witnessed what happens when someone defies Mr. Combs. She had also been threatened and victimized by Mr. Combs and did not want to cause a problem because she feared him. As Mr. Combs demanded Miss Porter and Miss Lampros to engage in sex, Mr. Combs sat close by, masturbating for some time before pushing Kim Porter off Miss Lampros and forcing his penis inside of her and raping her. This is a lot. I was not prepared. Y'all, I did not read this before. I was not prepared for all of this to be going on. Let me just tell you that. My mind is like really processing right now. Miss Lampros felt numb at the moment and emotionally checked out. A few hours later, Miss Lampros recalls being woken by Mr. Combs and told to leave the residence. She felt disgusted, ashamed, and embarrassed and couldn't believe what had happened. Shortly after this event, Miss Lampros slowly distanced herself from Mr. Combs, even though she was reluctant to be with him. He was industry connections and invitations to exclusive events to keep her attached. Mr. Combs went so far as to invite her to Kim Porter's birthday celebration. Here's a card here for that. End of the road. So I guess this is the last one. They said there was 4 instances. Just before we get to those 3, I don't even know what to say. I'm just I'm at a complete loss. I'm at a loss for words, thoughts, comments. We just got to let it breathe. End of the road. In or about 1998, Miss Lampros found the courage to end her relationship with Mr. Combs. She had finally suffered enough. However, this ending was one-sided. Mr. Combs and Kim Porter were not done with Miss Lampros. Kim Porter was very resentful of Miss Lampros after she was forced to engage in sex with Miss Lampros. She dined at Miss Lampros' place of employment, a bar named Silver, which was in Soho. According to Miss Lampros, Miss Porter was enraged when she saw her. According to Miss Lampros, 2 days later, Miss Porter called her employer and complained to the manager, alleging that Miss Lampros attempted to poison her. She then stated that her boyfriend was Sean Combs and could have the business shut down if he did not immediately terminate Miss Lampros. Later that evening, the manager told her he had to let her go because Mr. Combs called and demanded that he fire her. So this is wild. If this is allegedly true, the power here, the dynamics. Miss Lampros believes that Miss Porter got Miss Lampros fired in retaliation for what Mr. Combs made them do. According to Miss Lampros, her boss was afraid of Mr. Combs and his contacts and told her he had to do it or Mr. Combs could risk getting his business closed. Miss Lampros called Mr. Combs and he showed no remorse that she was out of a job, and in fact, he laughed about it. At the time she ended their relationship, Miss Lampros recalls Mr. Combs' penis being adolescently in both length and width. Ooh, oof, oof. Let me. This is not. I was not prepared. She said adolescently in both length and width. She recalls him being circumcised and remembers a tattoo on his chest.
Just to confirm, you'd like to call Tim?
Mm-mm. Excuse me, y'all. My Siri thought I was just talking to her for a minute. All right. With Sean John Clothing, while in a relationship, I'm interested. Let's see what this is about. Cause why is it Sean John Clothing? It's the title of this part of the lawsuit or the factual allegations. Says while in a relationship with Mr. Combs, Ms. Lampros was a student at FIT. She had a passion for fashion, and Mr. Combs knew this. Mr. Combs promised Ms. Lampros several working opportunities in the fashion and music industry, and the two often discussed his plans to launch his own clothing brand. Within months of Ms. Lampros ending the relationship, Mr. Combs launched Sean John. And so this is sexual assault encounter number 4. According to Miss Lampros, she saw Mr. Combs at an event at Rockefeller Center in or about the end of 2000 towards the beginning of 2001. At the time, Miss Lampros says Mr. Combs may have been filming a season of Making the Band. According to Miss Lampros, when Mr. Combs saw her, he approached Miss Lampros and asked the camera crew to turn off the cameras to not film their interaction. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs asked her how she was, expressed to her that he missed her, and asked if she would leave the event at Rockefeller Center with him. Miss Lampros rejected Mr. Combs and left. According to Miss Lampros, later that evening, he kept calling her and asking if he would come to his apartment on Park Avenue, but she said no. He even offered to send his driver to pick her up. Finally, he offered to come with the driver to pick her up. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs did not like the word no. He called a few more times, so she stopped answering the phone. According to Miss Lampros, a few days later, he called again, begging to see her. Reluctantly and regrettably, she allowed him to come over to her apartment. Oof. Mm. All right. She allowed him to come over to her apartment, located at 477 Central Park West, to hear what he had to say. Miss Lampros figured it was during the day and doubted that he would try to harm her. According to Miss Lampros, when she opened the door, his security was sitting on the stairwell. Knowing that security was there made Miss Lampros feel a bit better about letting him in. They sat on her couch and began talking. According to Miss Lampros, Mr. Combs began apologizing for his past behaviors. He started telling her that he was a changed man. He then showered her with compliments, telling her how good she looked and kept reminiscing about their prior sex life. Is that a sex life or is that abuse? Like, what are we reminiscing about? He then began dropping hints about them having sex. Miss Lampros rejected his advances. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Mr. Combs violently grabbed her and forced himself onto her. He began kissing her and touching her against her will. At that point, Miss Lampros fought him off after she quickly realized it was a big mistake to have allowed him to visit her. She told him to leave, and as she felt that he just wanted to use her for sex and hadn't changed at all. Even more disgusting was the fact that Miss Lampros knew that Mr. Combs was involved in a very public relationship with Jennifer Lopez. According to several media reports from the time, Mr. Combs ended his relationship with Jennifer Lopez due to infidelity in February 2001. This was around the same time that Mr. Combs sexually assaulted Miss Lampros. Luckily for Miss Lampros, the couch was right near the door of the apartment, so it was easy for her to reach for the door, open it, and demand him to leave. She ensured that the security could hear her telling him to exit. She was afraid that Mr. Combs would have raped her, as he does not take no for an answer and had a history of violently handling her and forcing her to perform oral on him. Miss Lampros is in possession of several of Mr. Combs' phone numbers throughout the years. And there are pictures of the phone numbers. Miss Lampros discovered that Mr. Combs recorded and disclosed the tape of him having sex with her. Wow. According to Miss Lampros, in or about 2023, Miss Lampros was at a function and a gentleman, redacted name, and informed the man Miss Lampros was dating that he should reconsider dating her because he personally saw a video of her and Sean Combs having sex. According to Miss Lampros, redacted name shared that he saw the tape during the summer of 1997. According to Miss Lampros, she was told that Mr. Combs apparently recorded them having sex without her knowing and showed it to multiple people. Wow, wow, wow. Then we got our cause of actions. Y'all know that this is what solidifies. We learn everything about the allegations here and what they're actually going after. And the first cause of action is battery. So we definitely got that part with the garage story, and everything without her consent. She also claiming substantial financial damages and psychological damages, loss of dignity, privacy. The second cause of action, assault slash sexual assault, and I think that's self-explanatory from what we read. Third cause of action, negligent infliction of emotional distress. And if all this alleged acts are true, that's definitely highly traumatizing. And yes, so an emotional distress is definitely well within the realms there. And the fourth cause of action is the violation of victims of gender motivated violence protection law, which that definitely seems to be the standard once these sexual lawsuits come out, and this is whenever Arista and other folks are pulled in as well. Um, that she says people were aware of some of these things. People aided and abetted, or they didn't do things. So, for instance, she points out Arista failed to timely and properly educate, train, supervise, and/or monitor their agents or employees regarding policies and procedures that should be followed when sexual abuse is suspected or observed. Um, so that's just a little sample of what goes into there. But that's whenever you pull in all the other big dogs and what they are being sued for. So what she's asking for, or what the ask is for money judgment, representing compensatory damages, including consequential damages, lost wages, earnings, and all other sums of money, together with the interest of these amounts according to proof, for money judgment for mental pain and anguish and severe emotional distress according to proof, for punitive and exemplary damages according to proof, for attorney fees and costs, for prejudgment and post-judgment interest, and such other and further relief as the court may deem just and proper. Plaintiff hereby demands a trial by jury on all issues of fact and damages stated herein. And this was filed on May 23rd, 2024. So April is the last person. I don't think anybody has come out this week, unless I have missed something, but because the people are coming out. But she definitely represents a case here that, wow, it's some stuff in there. If this, I don't know what to say, y'all. I just don't know. But there we have it. That's April Lampros case right there. That's pretty heavy. It's just, this stuff is wild. It's wild what is going on, what is happening, what is transpiring. And just even after seeing that Cassie video, I'm like, he deserves every bad thing coming to him. I don't want to hear this pray for him stuff that y'all be throwing out, and we all have done things. No, we all have not. We all have not participated in sexual assault, rape, battery, threats, possibly killing people, all these things. No. Mm-mm. I'm not on that all sins are created equal stuff. That is not me right here. Some things are greater and by far worse, and do much more long-term lasting damage to people. And you need to answer for those things. He's not out there praying for us. Okay? So what is this? That's that all that turn that y'all want to be mad. It kills me. Because they want to complain about like slavery times and a turn the other cheek mentality and stuff, and nonviolence, and there'd be so many complaints about the way our ancestors did things. But yet, whenever you see creeps like this doing this stuff, then all of a sudden everybody want to be like, well, we all do things. Let's pray. Let's no. Mm-mm-mm. Well, keep up with the Parker's Couch as we bring you hot topics that are going on, and look forward to the podcast coming back. We're going to get back on that podcast. Been doing some brainstorming and thinking around that to keep that going. But love the support. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. And I'll talk to you later, Tater Tots. Stay safe out there.